Hello everyone and welcome to the FMSCOUT YouTube channel. My name is Jack. I'm going to be doing my first video here for FMSCOUT. Just a quick introduction on me. I have my own YouTube channel, The Cult of Football Manager. I'm a UEFA licensed coach in real life and I'm actually on Football Manager 2021. And in this video today we're going to be looking at our Pep Guardiola tactical recreation and some analysis from real life as well. And if you like what you see in this video, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I just want to say a quick shout out and thank you to Nap. We've spoken a lot over the last couple of months in regards to real football and Football Manager, and without him, I don't think this recreation could have been possible to the standard that it is, so I need to say a quick thank you to him. Before we get into the specifics of the analysis and the tactic itself, I just think it's important to note a few things when it comes to Football Manager, and how it can cloud what we're seeing and what we think we're seeing when it comes to the game. Now, the first thing is the possession statistic itself. Now, it's calculated differently in real life to how it's calculated in the game. It's calculated in the game like it used to be done in real life, which is basically like a stop clock. So a team has the ball for 10 seconds, it calculates them to have it for 10 seconds, then when it's changed over, it then calculates the other team. So in this scenario, if each team has the ball for 10 seconds each, it's 50-50 for possession. This changed quite a few years ago with Opta, who provides stats for the Premier League, where they then changed it to be based around a mathematical formula on total passes completed against the number of overall passes. In this way of calculating possession, if each team had the ball for 10 seconds each, but one team had passed the ball 7 times amongst themselves, but the other team only passed it 3 times, the possession would be 70-30, even though they both had the ball for 10 seconds each. Now, I have simplified that new formula quite a lot. I believe that Opta do use more than just that now for the way they calculate it, but there was a jump from the time to the passes. I think it just shows there in one example how it can be quite different, the statistic itself, just based on that alone. So when you're looking at the overall possession, the possession number in the game, you need to look at it with a slightly different point of view than you would if it was a game from real life. Another thing to consider are just the match engine limitations of the game. Now, there's just a few different movements and combinations and patterns that are very difficult to get out, and it's based on the behaviour of certain roles that we have in our tactic, but also the behaviour of the back four and the midfield four of the opposition. So it'll be something for us to look out for, and we'll go through more detail as we go on. But yeah, the possession statistic and some of the match engine limitations are very important to keep in consideration when you're trying to do replication of any tactic, but specifically this one. With that in mind, let's have a look at how we did in some of our saves. So with City first, we managed to win the league on 101 points, which was fantastic. We scored 123 goals, conceded 33, and pretty much dominated the entire season. We had an average possession of 60%, which is not bad for the Premier League. The Premier League is by far the most difficult league to dominate in terms of possession. I'm not entirely sure whether it's just down to the reputation of like the smaller clubs still being pretty high, or just the style of football amongst the other teams in the league, but it's by far the most difficult one to dominate in. So 60% in the Premier League in your first season is actually not bad at all. So here in our Rangers save, we managed to get 107 points total, which was fantastic. We lost the very last game of the season. We nearly went the whole season unbeaten like they did in real life. We managed to average 66% possession, which is brilliant. Here with Rosenborg, we managed to win the league on 63 points, which was brilliant. And here, as you can see, we got 63% possession in this season. The season's only 30 matches though, so it's important to ignore the passes completed for this one. And here we have Real Sociedad. As you can see with the previous teams, they were all teams that were expected to win their league in their division or be close to it. So I thought I would try it with a team that wasn't expected to, but was also in a different country again. So I chose Real Sociedad, and I couldn't believe how well it worked. It was quite unbelievable just how much it dominated teams that were supposed to be much better than us. So we finished on 97 points in the first season with Real Sociedad. I think any tactic that does that is pretty good, but to do it with a tactic that doesn't traditionally do too well in Football Manager match engines in terms of retaining the ball, having lots of possession, it was incredible, and I was so happy with it. So yeah, only 59% average possession, but we were the joint top in the league, and we probably should have been top. I don't know why Real Madrid finished above us, maybe because of pass completion, but we had more passes completed, way more than everybody else. I mean, Barcelona ended up on 13,000, we ended up on 17,000 plus. So yeah, very successful season playing as Sociedad. It just shows the potential of the tactic, I think, that even as a team that isn't supposed to be a title challenger, you can still be very successful even early on. It is important to note that I didn't use all of the original players. I did make 1 or 2 transfers, but I think most people that will play as Sociedad wouldn't use the original players. Anyway, you'd all go and sign your own players. So yeah, there's that. So yeah, that's going to conclude just the section on the results. You've seen the results of the tactic. Now let's look at some analysis and see exactly what we are trying to recreate. Now I'm sure most of you have seen this before. This diagram here is reportedly the the way that Pep breaks down the pitch for his players, especially when it comes to training. So as you can see with this one, it's numbered 1 to 20. Just keep this in mind when we're looking at the players and the zones. I'm not going to refer back to it all the time. It's just an important way to look at the pitch slightly differently. The important ones for us are the half spaces, so looking at 15 and 13. Those are the zones we're going to focus on a lot, especially combining them with the wider zones in 17, 16, 12 and 11. So that's how we're going to look at our analysis, and specifically looking at how City exploit the back four, because I think that the way that they play out and the shapes that they build with can change depending on the opposition formation a lot and how the opposition team set up. But exploiting the back four seems to have a lot more similar themes behind it. They seem to have 2 or 3 different scenarios that they can get opposition teams in, and it's very hard for the teams to stop them once they get them in that sort of like position. So we're going to focus more on them exploiting the back four because it's a lot easier to break down and simplify and to give us a specific target for recreation. The match engine is going to limit us doing it completely perfectly all across the board. So if we could at least isolate some things that they do consistently over and over again and replicate those, I think that's a great starting point for our replication and how we're going to judge how successful we're being with it. The word pattern in coaching circles is a bit of a loaded term, and I'm not necessarily saying these are patterns of Manchester City, but these are things that happen quite a lot. And just to simplify, I'm going to use the word pattern. So I just thought I'd make that distinction now. So in this first pattern, we're going to see Manchester City look to exploit the half space, so the gap between the fullback and the centre-back. They can do it a number of different ways. It's something that City do over and over again, using different players to exploit that space, but they always look to exploit that space for a number of different reasons, as we're going to go through here in a quick breakdown. So as you can see in this animation, the right winger drops off the back line to get onto the ball. The right central midfielder here exploits the gap between the fullback and the centre-back because the right winger has attracted the attention of the left-back, plays it into the gap, the player runs through and plays it across the goal for City to score at the far post. This is just a very brief example of one way they could do it. In the second way, it could be that the central midfielder is too far to exploit the gap himself, so maybe the winger looks to make a combination, then goes through the gap himself, looking to link up with a deeper player. Could be a central midfielder, it could be somebody else. So that could be a second way that they could look to exploit the gap. Now, if the opposition were to block it off and the fullback was to stay narrow, that's absolutely fine because the winger just stays wide holding the width and then he can get the ball on the outside of the back line and then look to exploit the back four via that way. And I'm sure you can see already that no matter what happens in that scenario, if they can get you into that sort of position with the right winger occupying the fullback and the central midfielder getting beyond his midfield marker and midfield runner, that they're going to get you in a very dangerous situation almost every time. And this isn't a new concept. Many years ago, Thierry Henry was on Sky Sport doing analysis when Pep, I think, was originally supposed to go to City. And he talked about how in training, Pep would create like a T-shape for his pitch. So that it's basically like this, it's split into a T-shape where the two halves of the first 2/3 are split in half either side, and then there's just a final third that's completely free. The point of this was for positional discipline in possession, so that Xavi and Iniesta would never end up on the same side of the pitch, and that players had to just trust that the team would get the ball to them in their zone, even when they're not involved for long periods of the game. Here we're going to look at an example from the Everton game again against City earlier on this season. What's important to note here with all the positions being listed is the point I'm trying to get across that should be quite clear is that the formation that Pep plays is just irrelevant. Like I'm seeing so many people even today debate whether they played a 4-4-2 against somebody, whether it's 4-3-3, whether it was a 4-6-0. It just doesn't matter. It's more about the role in the moment and the principles of what they're trying to do and the zones they're trying to occupy. So I think it's important to forget the raw formation. You're looking at what sort of combinations of movements we're trying to get. So here on the ball we have Phil Foden, who's currently, let's put him in the left-back role. We have him next to Rodri, who's playing as the pivot. De Bruyne is a central midfielder, next to him, all in like a line. And it's another thing to note, if you Google and look online, look on YouTube even, there's lots of videos about Pep's hard, fast rules of like, you can't have 3 people in a horizontal zone and 2 people in a vertical. As you can see here, it can happen in any moment of football. Football's quite dynamic, it moves a lot. So you can almost argue that City have at least 4 players in line. There's actually 5 with the left winger being pretty close, with the right back all the way to the left wing. There's going to be moments in the game where this happens. Whichever your point of view is, my point here is that, the formation is something to forget about when we're looking at roles and responsibilities of the players. So from this scenario, we're going to see them yet again try and exploit the back four in the same way that we've seen them before. One of the players in a central higher zone is going to drop out and Foden's now going to progress and they're going to switch positions. So that's currently Cancelo and Foden that are going to switch. Cancelo's gone higher as the, quote, central midfielder, I suppose, and Phil Foden is the left back. The ball has found its way to Jesus, who's currently playing as our left winger role. He gets on it, he's occupying the fullback who's about to come out and press him, and Phil Foden already knows what's happening. Like clockwork, he knows that he's in this role, he's in this moment, he's going to make his run between the fullback and centre-back and try and get on the ball. and everybody else behind him is going to start to recover themselves, so they're in a good set position to help defend the counter if something bad happens here. So as you can see, then it plays out exactly the same way. The central midfielder gets between the fullback and centre-back. As you can see, everybody behind them starting to get back to a more normal shape for City, and to help defend the counter and to help maintain the ball if it does end up going backwards from this situation. In this last example from the Everton game, we're going to just show quickly what the run can do in its best form when you don't get the ball. So if the person in the central midfielder makes the run, what other positives can we get from that run without them directly getting on the ball themselves? So again, we're in the same situation. City have got Everton right in the look that they want. They've got a wide player staying very wide and a central midfielder that's high, in line with them or close to being in line with them, and is now going to make their run in behind the back four. So Everton here have had it done to them enough times where they're starting to get frustrated with it, and they start to drop early with that run and try and stop it. The two covering players both go with the run, leaving loads of space to little Bernardo Silva here, who looks like he's completely free, and the person that's occupied by the wide player is not even looking behind them, doesn't know anything about the situation. City have got them in exactly the kind of situation and scenario that they want. And again, going back to the formation thing quickly, like Foden and Jesus here, people are talking about City playing a 4-4-2 now as a point of conversation. You could easily argue that in this game, City played a 4-4-2, a 4-6-0, or a 4-3-3. It's all about the moment and the situation. That's very, very important to remember when watching Pep's teams. So as you can see, after the run, he's left an absolutely massive gap for Bernardo Silva to get on the ball. For Premier League standards, that's quite a lot of space on the edge of the area. And you've got a left-footed player about to get on the ball, and he's going to have as much space as he could possibly need to destroy Everton from this situation. Bernardo Silva takes the opportunity to travel towards the defenders that are stood there rather than try and cut in and shoot, at which point now Mahrez makes a run on the inside and is going to get the ball back off him just on the edge of the area in a perfect shooting position for Mahrez. And as you can see, somebody has just popped up on the right wing just to be that wide player and maintain the width for the team. In case they do want to retain the ball and go back, they've now got the player in the wide zone to continue to dominate the way that they just were. And the final picture, Riyad Mahrez gets the ball on the edge of the area, fires in a brilliant shot, City score, go 2-1 up, and Everton never recover from this moment. And you might think that I'm way oversimplifying how City get past the back four and how easy they make it, but it really is that easy for them, and it's down to fundamentally how teams defend with a back four in particular, and particularly in England. And we're just going to quickly go through why that happens and why it's so easy for City. No matter what teams do, they're going to leave a gap somewhere for City to exploit. So here's an example of how a team might defend in two lines of four. If the ball's central, width of the penalty box, very standard stuff for a coach. That's a sort of like general theme that teams like to go for, leaving the wide areas free and compacting the middle to make sure there's no space and no space between the lines. Now the first issue is when the ball goes wide. Now playing against City, the difference with City to most other teams is their central midfielders are so advanced and they're so willing to make runs beyond the back line that this becomes an issue. Now when the ball goes wide, the fullback traditionally will be the person that goes out and presses the ball. Now that leaves a gap in the back line. Most teams in the Premier League will have their central midfielder on that side be the one that drops in and covers the gap and goes with any runners. So like we can see in this picture, that's the role of a central midfielder there. The issue that you have is that if this left central midfielder here gets to that gap before the right central midfielder does, that like the way that City do, Phil Foden or Kevin De Bruyne in these scenarios, they would quite easily get in there, and that is a very dangerous situation to be in. Now, most teams don't attack like this because if your central midfielder in that scenario is making that kind of run, he's leaving a massive gap in the middle of the pitch, which if the attack breaks down, you could then be countered on. So you need a team that can definitely, one, keep the ball, and two, be set up to defend the counter, which when Pep's teams are at their best, they are brilliant at defending the counter, and then when they're off form a little bit, they're normally getting caught in these type of scenarios. And there's many different ways to go about it. But this isn't the only way to defend against this kind of scenario. Teams could do it other ways. So in this example, a wide player has the ball. We've got the right back on it, but it doesn't really matter. It's only for an example purpose. And as you can see, like it's not totally realistic with the way the players are, but it's just an example and to show you what they could do. You can have two lines of four coming across together to be very compact, and you would stop in this kind of situation the gaps between the fullback and centre-back because the two central players closest to the wingers are so tight together. But the issue then is the far side. And one of Pep's principles in positional play is that, he says this many times, is that to create some combinations and passes on one side to then go and switch the ball to the other side, to the opponent's weak side, and attack there. So that's just what would happen in this kind of situation. They'd be very happy for you to do this and to block their primary run, is because then they would just go around the other side and they'd exploit you a different way. So yeah, this doesn't really stop the problem. It stops one problem, but then it creates another. Another alternative way is that you could drop your opposite winger to the back line. Now this makes you defend in a 5-3-2 shape, which is a big issue because it can leave you in a very deep defensive shape and be very hard to get out and to counter-attack and to sustain any sort of possession just sitting deep too early and gifting domination of the zones and the areas to the opposition. So City would be happy with this as well, because if you did drop the right winger in this scenario, they would work the ball back to the middle, to the left central midfielder most likely, and they'd try and find an overload somewhere else, and they'd get you in the same look, just at a deeper point of the half. So they're very happy for you to do that as well. And as you can see here in this scenario, if it was to be that kind of situation, City could quite easily work the ball back, first of all back to their fullback, and then work it back into the middle, and they just find pockets of space all in front of your back five, and the wide players would just stay high and wide, dragging players all over the place, and eventually they probably find a gap between the winger and the fullback there, or the fullback and centre back on the other side in this makeshift back five. So no matter how you do it, there's going to be a gap somewhere. There's going to be zones that the opposition are going to leave open for City to dominate. So it doesn't really matter how they go about it. Yeah, that's 3 different ways that teams could defend with a back 4 against City, and most teams prefer to take the first option, in England at least. And here is an example of this happening in a real game from 2015 between Tottenham and Chelsea. Chelsea got their back 4, the fullback's gone out to press a wide player, and as you can see, a Tottenham player is going to exploit that gap between the fullback and centre-back, and Matic, who has got the arrow on him there, is going to come across and try and plug that gap and stop them playing into that channel. And as you can see, Matic has dropped into the back line, into that gap, but if Kane would have been slightly quicker with the ball, he probably could have got the ball into the gap. He probably still could now. So the point that we're trying to show here is that even if they have a player going with the player into the back line, is that there's sometimes a chance for just 2 or 3 seconds where your midfielder's got the run on their opposition central midfielder. And if you can execute the run and the pass correctly, you're going to get them nearly every time. If you can get them in this first look, if you can get somebody wide on the ball with time on their feet, all you need is somebody close by to be in that zone to make the run, and you're going to get a chance if teams defend this way. In the last breakdown of this section, we're going to look at Manchester City against Swansea, against JDFM, Johnny's very own Swansea. Big shout out to you, Johnny. So here in this situation, we have Swansea playing a back 4, City moving the ball from right to left. It's important to recognise this now because it's going to look slightly confusing in a second, but the midfielder that's nearest to the back 4 right in the centre, he's going to be the midfielder that's responsible for dropping into the back line. So here, as you can see, City have got Sané very wide. He's very wide, and you've got David Silva, who's now broken into the gap between the fullback and centre-back. The gap is about 25 yards between them because the player nearest to David Silva is actually the midfielder who's supposed to have dropped in. And as you can see, he's still screening, doesn't have any idea what's going on behind him, and City could easily play a ball straight through. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen, and City played the ball through a few more times, and you can see now Sané's recognised the fact that somebody needs to make that run again between the fullback and centre-back. The gap is still there. It's still been created because the fullback that was marking him has still stayed quite wide, and he has an opportunity now to go and exploit the gap. He makes the run, and Gundogan is about to play the ball straight through to him into the gap that he created for himself. So going back to our original patterns of how City break a back 4, the wide player is very much okay to go and make this movement himself if there's no midfielder there, which there is not. The most important thing I think to notice in this picture is Fabian Delph at the bottom of the screen. Now, what he's noticing here is that if this attack breaks down and the ball is retained, they're going to need somebody wide to stretch the back line again. And now Sané's made his run inside. He's now a central player in a central zone. So now Delph's going to make a run and make sure that he is the, quote, left winger, let's say. He's going to play the left winger role for the team. Incidentally, it doesn't matter anyway. But if it does and it is retained, he's going to be there, and then what would happen is somebody from behind the ball would just move around and occupy the role that he was in before. He was playing as a left back, more like an inverted one in this game. But yeah, that's what's important to note in this picture. So with all of those examples of real life, I think it's time we look at Football Manager itself and look at how we can recreate these into Football Manager. I think some bullet points to note then for the things we're going to look for our recreation, especially when it comes to breaking down the back 4. We need to be dominating the ball, obviously. We need to be exploiting the half spaces and opening up patterns and principles that open up multiple possibilities from the same scenario. That's what we're looking to try and do as a minimum. We would love to ideally have, a decent amount of possession and passes completed, but the relevance of that has to be taken into context depending on, the actual raw figure and how the patterns are playing. So what I'm saying by that is that if we have 57% as an average, that might seem and feel quite low, but if we're getting all of the things that we want in terms of patterns, movements, creation of chances and all the other stuff, then I don't think we need to be unhappy with that. But as we've seen already, that isn't the case. But I'm saying if it is, it's not the end of the world. City this season in real life just had a game away to Southampton where they had 52% possession, so it does happen. The actual possession statistic isn't everything. So yeah, with that being said, let's have a look at some of the movements we were able to create in the game. Now, I've got 2 fantastic clips to show you here of the tactic working in the game almost perfectly. It took a while to get to this level and for us to see these patterns the way that they came out. But they're both fantastic, and we're going to break them. We're going to break the first one down, then we'll just play the second one as is. So here what you can see in this first picture is we've just played the ball up from a goal kick. Now this move even starts from the goal kick, which is brilliant. So the right back that's out of the shot is the inverted wing back for us. He's going to make a movement inside, and what that's going to do is it's going to occupy the attention of the left winger, who you can see here is quite narrow and is currently screening the ball into our winger. So in picture 2 now you can see the winger is now occupied by the right back, the central midfielder is there, and now there's a massive clear open lane from the centre back straight through to the winger. And the winger, just like we'd want to see in real life, he drops off the front line a little bit to get on the ball. So he drops off to get a passing lane completely open to him. So he's dropped off to get the ball now from the centre back. And now the central midfielder started to make an aggressive run forward. So the central midfielder, as you can see, is now gone quite far away from the fullback compared to the previous picture. And we're starting to get a potential scenario of a good pattern here. The right winger gets on the ball here, and the fullback initially doesn't actually commit to the right winger. He decides to go back with the central midfielder because he's got a 2v1. He doesn't really know what to do. And we've got them exactly where we want them in terms of it being a situation where no matter what they do here, we're going to get them. It just depends which way they want us to get in behind. The left back does start to commit to the right winger, then he starts to drop off, and now we have the ball in behind, getting play from the right winger to the right central midfielder between the fullback and the centre back. The right central midfielder perfectly gets onto the ball, plays it across to the striker who shoots and scores, and it was one of the most perfect movements I had seen in a replication of Pep Guardiola football, and I thought that I could retire on that. But then a few minutes later, we saw this. And in this clip, like you can see here, we moved the ball from right to left. It goes, the left winger occupies the fullback, plays it through perfectly to our left central midfielder, and the gap there was perfect. You know, we managed to get the ball through. It's a bit of a scrappy way to end the move, but going back just to the start of it, like as you can see, I'll play it through a couple of times for you. It's just perfect in terms of the movements of the players. The principles of what we're trying to do are all there. And going back to the issues of the match engine, now the wingers aren't as wide as they should be. And again, that's partly down to the match engine. I don't think we could do much about that. But they were wide enough to stretch the back line. The central midfielder was aggressive enough early enough to get the ball early into that gap. Okay, the pass isn't great, and it's a bit of a combination to get the ball back to the middle. But the whole idea is the principle of it, and we're getting the principles out, which is just incredible, because of all the things to achieve in the game, this pattern is by far the most difficult one, I think, to do on a regular basis for a team that dominates the ball in this kind of formation. So I was really happy to see both of these in the same game. And yeah, you're going to see in the montages throughout this video, you're going to see all of the other patterns come out in all of the other goals, but this one in particular is the most difficult one to get out, and I thought I'd just break it down and show you that even this was possible with this current setup. So this tactic is going to be mainly based around Pep Guardiola at Manchester City from 2017 to 2019. The reason I say that is I think that one big difference from this season, from my analysis I did, was the build-up shape. And although I'm looking specifically more at how we exploit the back four in terms of the replication, because I think that's the big thing that makes a difference between Pep Guardiola's teams and most other teams, is I think those ways and those scenarios of you exploiting the back four is what really makes the recreation replication good or not. And realistic or not. Now, the build-up phase is important, and it's changed a lot this season. So we're just going to quickly look at the two differences. The first one we're going to look at is Pep Guardiola's 2-3 build-up shape. This would have been used pretty much his entire time at City until this season as a base sort of setup for in the building phase. So City have almost like a W shape. You have the two centre backs and you have the two full backs going inverted with the pivot in front. So it almost makes like a W shape, as you can see in this next photo here. As you can see here, it's like a W shape almost in the build-up. So that's City's traditional 2-3 build-up shape, and that's what this tactic is designed for, because it seems to work the best in the game in terms of success. And one of the reasons why I didn't go into more detail about this in the analysis and in my recreation is because I think that City, in how they play out of possession and how they build up their attacks, can change quite a lot, and probably changes the most depending on who they're playing against. And at some point early this season, City switched to a 3-2 build-up, as we will see in a second here in the Everton game. So as you can see in this image, City are in their 3-2 build-up with 3 at the back, or sometimes you can call it 1 at the back, because it's like 1 centre-back and 2 quite wide centre-backs, almost 2 orthodox full-backs. And then one of the inverted wing-backs goes in to become a second pivot with Rodri, who moves out to a wider area. So this is how City played against Everton and have played a lot this season like this. And like we've said before about the formation, I mean, Phil Foden's playing up front. They're almost like a striker with Jesus, so you can call it whatever you want ahead of that. People are calling it a 4-4-2 at the moment, but I don't think it's really important about the exact formation. And even the part of the back, like calling it a 3, some people could call it a 1, because it really is like having one player just back and everybody else is in quite an advanced or wide position. So yeah, the numbers aren't important. What is important is to see what sort of areas and zones that Cancelo now occupies and how aggressive he is with his runs. So in this example, we have Iwobi, who is instructed, I guess, to press the wide fullback in this scenario, and I'm assuming one of the two strikers is going in on the nearest pivot. And we can see how this can break down so quickly. The ball is played across, and already we've got Iwobi, who's literally pointing to Cancelo saying, I don't know what to do here, I've got two players, somebody has to go with him. And Richarlison, who was dropping with him, decides now he's going to press the centre-back and also try and screen the ball into the middle. But that's not going to be good enough because City have got passing lanes open, probably to Jesus and to Cancelo directly here. The ball is played straight through to Jesus, as you can see, and now Cancelo and Jesus are both past that first line of press. So they've just taken 3 Everton players out the game instantly, and they've now got a massive gap between them and the Everton back line. And as you can see, that Phil Foden, who is quite advanced, is now already in that sort of area between the fullback and centre-back threatening, and the player that's on Foden there, that's going back with him, is a central midfielder. Cancelo then gets on the ball, travels with the ball at the back 4, or in this case, the back 4 plus Doucouré. Doucouré steps out to press the ball, and then we could have got the ball through to Foden. Unfortunately for City, it doesn't quite come off in this scenario, but you can just see how the double pivot can be such a threat for City and how beautifully it can destroy a team and their defensive shape if it's done correctly. This is one of the hardest things to achieve, I think, in Football Manager this year, and I've managed to do it and to do it successfully in a 3-2 shape. The only downside is that I don't feel like the sort of split pivot with the inverted fullback works too well as an overall tactic. But if you have a top team and you're playing as a top team, you could probably get away with it. But the success level of the tactic probably drops. But if you are playing as a top team, it shouldn't matter too much anyway. And I'll include that download with the group of downloaded tactics that are going to be in this video. So here it is in a orthodox 4-3-3 setup as we would see it as fans, I guess. Again, the formation's not too important though. Yeah, one thing to note, there's 2 different versions of it that I consider the main version. The deep lying forward version, I think, is the best recreation in terms of the patterns and the movements and everything that comes with the recreation. I think that's the best recreation, but changing the deep lying forward to a poacher seems to be the best version in terms of results. So it depends on how much you care about the actual recreation, but the poacher seems to do very, very well. He seems to make runs beyond the back line on a more regular basis, but more so in the build-up phase. Although the poacher, it says in the description, does basically nothing in the build-up, I don't think that's entirely true. In the first third, he does make a lot of runs in behind and is very direct with his runs, but once you progress into the middle third and the final third, he plays quite a lot like other strikers as well. He just stays quite central. It doesn't change it as much as you'd think. It only changes it in the first third, and it can make him run in behind a lot. And it seems to do one of 2 things. Either he pulls off to the side a little bit, makes a run in behind, and you play it straight beyond the back line. Or when the defence get bored of being beaten in behind and they drop, it then creates a lot of space for the Mazzalas and the inverted wingers to then exploit. So it works really well, actually, with the poacher. And believe me when I say, it was literally, and I'm using the word correctly, it was literally the last role and duty that I used for the striker. The tactic was close, and I knew it was close, but there was a few things not quite right. And before I changed anything else, I wanted to change all of the striker roles until I got what I was looking for. And I went through every single one that you can possibly use and all of the duties on all of them. And the reason I didn't use poacher till last is because if you read what it says, it couldn't be anything further from a Pep Guardiola striker. But you've got to look at what you're seeing in the match engine, not what you see in the tactics creator. I think what's important for people is that when they see a tactical recreation, is that there's like a gut feeling of, oh, they didn't play like that. It's before you have those thoughts, just have a look at the match engine, see how it plays, and see if it does play differently to how you're thinking it looks in the tactics creator. I think it's really important for tactical recreations that you do that. In addition to our earlier patterns that we were talking about and how to exploit the back 4, one of the big principles of the way Pep plays is like we mentioned previously about trying to exploit the weak side. So that City will make combinations and, look like they're going to attack down one side and it'll be switched to the other side. And when I say switched, I don't mean like a 35-yard diagonal. Although that could happen, it's quite often it's moved through different players to get to that scenario. One of the reasons for that, I think, most obviously, is it gives time for not just the wide player is going to be there anyway in the far wide zone, but it gives time for the other player that's supposed to be with them, whether it's central midfield, whether it's a striker, whoever it is, whoever's nearest to that player, it gives them time to have a supporting player get to them as well. But that's definitely a component of it, as you can see here, using Pep's pitch and just a quick animation of City here playing out from the back onto the left-hand side, looking to eventually switch it to the opposite side using the inverted wing back and trying to get the right central midfielder always into that gap anyway. Obviously with these animations you're always putting the players exactly where you want them, but I can't use real life examples in videos because of copyright, so You'll have to take my word for it. That's one of the things that they do. Here we're going to see a few examples of the gap between the fullback and centre-back being exploited by some runners. So the first couple here are going to be from the Sociedad save. So in this first short clip, you're just going to see a sprint through the gap, and as the player goes through and scores, good finish. Second clip, you're going to see, again, same sort of thing, but this time the player plays the ball across and we score. Again, probably as good as the original one that I showed. And in this last one, it gets a bit scrappy in terms of how they get there, but the principle is there. The winger's holding the width, the central midfielder is very aggressive in his run. We get the ball through the gap and he goes through and scores. So some good examples there of that. So what do we do if the central midfielder can't exploit the gap? We get the wide player to look to exploit it first, or anybody but wide player normally. So here the back four quite spread. The winger's actually going to start off wide, then go in central, and then finishes between the two centre backs there. That was good. So in this example here, the winger starts off wide. He then starts going narrow as the pit player's building up. He then exploits the gap between the fullback and the centre back himself with the movement towards the box and gets through and scores. Great finish. In this example, we show what happens if the wide player gets in a 1v1 scenario with the fullback and the central midfielder isn't quite there to support the run. One of the things that's definitely okay for a player here is they have the complete freedom to run at the player 1v1 if they choose to. We see a great example of it here where the fullback comes up to the winger, tries to take him on 1v1. The gap is created massively between the fullback and centre-back, but rather than having somebody run into the space, this time the central midfielder holds his run, then the winger exploits that space himself, goes on the outside of the fullback, plays it across, and a great finish. This goal is just brilliant. I mean, the move just continues. It's a great piece of play all the way through. We just retain the ball. We then move the play to the left-hand side. We start to shift them over to the left, to the right, their right-hand side, our left. The ball then gets played back across towards the middle, and this whole time our right wing has been wide the entire time, and he starts to go in slightly more narrow, then eventually the ball gets played straight across into him on the outside of the defender, and a great finish. So this is a good example of the opposite winger coming in at the far post. As you can see in this clip, I'll play it a couple of times, it's quite short. The opposite winger is out of camera shot originally, he comes in late, as the cross is about to come in, knows he needs to be in that scoring area, and eventually gets there a bit late, but he does get there in the end. This is probably a better example of it in terms of the movement. It's a shame that the cross is in the air and the way the cross exactly goes in, because it's not exactly how you would expect it to happen. But that's the same sort of principle, because the defenders are quite far back for this, so it doesn't show it completely. But yeah, the winger on the far side is coming in more narrow and is at that far post scoring zone as the cross comes in. And yeah, I think that's going to do it for this video. Just as I'm talking here, I'll keep playing through loads of the other clips in the background. Yeah, things to take away from the video is that replications are very hard to make completely realistic. Normally you have to cut some sort of corners. This recreation is purely based on in possession. Out of possession is very difficult to recreate what Pep's teams do, especially when you have to then trade off certain things that might affect the in possession stuff. So I've not really touched upon that. Yeah, what's important is that for a Pep recreation, you have to be looking to obviously dominate certain zones and certain areas of the pitch, which I think that we do. What I think is also important is that you're exploiting the back four on a regular basis. What you don't want to be doing is having a Pep tactic that has loads of possession in terms of the statistic in the game, but all that happens is that players just dribble to the byline, cross, and you score. You want to be able to see those patterns coming out in terms of the midfielder run beyond the back line, getting the ball through. You want to be able to see those things. I think too often with Pep recreations is everybody gets obsessed with the possession statistic and doesn't really look at what his teams do. And I'm not saying, by the way, that these patterns, I'm calling them, that they are actual patterns that they try to do all the time. I think it's more of a byproduct of just what happens when they play. But I think what's obviously certain is that there is definitely players' responsibilities to make those runs beyond the back line. One, to get the ball, but two, if they don't get the ball, can they get the ball to somebody else in space, like we saw with the Everton goal from the analysis. And yeah, I think this tactic gets you close. I think the point of this is that this is a blueprint. I think it's a good blueprint to start from. If you're trying to play Pep Guardiola style of football, it'll get you close. Maybe you find out things that work slightly better for your team. Maybe you find out things that work better just in general. But as you can see, it gets good results. And I've got a couple of different versions, whether it's this year's edition with the 3-2 build-up or previous with the 2-3. We've got, a couple of different variations of the tactic, and then just overall the better tactic being the poacher version, which still gets you the realistic patterns and movements, but it gets slightly less of them. But it's then overall a better tactic. So whatever your sort of feelings are on how much you care about the realism or the results of the tactic, there's a bit of everything here for you, and hopefully you'll find the one that suits you best. And if you can take this on and tweak it and improve it, brilliant. Please feel free to share it with me over at my own YouTube channel, which is the Cult of FM, or even on here in the comment section. Yeah, let me know what you do, if you do try the tactic, or if you've got one yourself. I think of all the recreations over the last few years, the hardest one to do has been Pep, and really any type of possession football, because the match engine and the game is just so unforgiving, I think, towards those kind of tactics and systems. And you have to be a very good team and get things very right for it to work. Whereas other systems, you could probably have quite a few flaws in your tactic and still get away with it. Whereas with this, I don't think you can. So I think it's really important to get things right. So anybody that can have any success in any form is just fantastic. And I think it's brilliant for us all to share. And yeah, let us know at FM Scout what you think. And if you ever got anything similar, let us know. And yeah, with that being said, thank you very much for watching and listening to my first video here on FM Scout. And I'll see you soon.